Welcome to Watermark's Church Leadership Podcast, a conversation with church leaders for church leaders. I'm your host, John McGee. Thanks so much for joining us today. Well, hey friends, today we're joined in the podcast studio by my good friend, Dave Bruskas. Dave, welcome, brother.
Hey, John. Good to be with you.
So, Dave, I'll let you talk a little bit about what it is that you do here at Watermark, but I want to introduce you from my point of view. So, Dave has been a pastor, a church planner. He's worked a lot with other pastors. And so we met because of an email. And so Watermark was looking to hire someone, and one of your daughters sent this email. And it was, essentially, I don't know exactly what you're looking for, but I want to push forward the name of the best pastor I know, and so, which is,
no bias there.
Right. And so as I read, it's like, oh, she's talking about her dad. She is, and I forgot exactly the verbiage, but it was effectively, hey, I've lived with this man, for 20 plus years, whatever, and this is the best pastor that I know. And she attached your resume and said, I think you should hire, my dad. And so I actually knew who you were. We hadn't met yet. I looked at your resume and go, okay, this guy's way overqualified, for this job. This is not his job. However, I absolutely want to meet someone, that had their daughter say the things about them that she said about you. And so that struck up our friendship, and it's been, you've been a real blessing to me, brother, through
Thank you, John.
Some tough times through the pandemic and things like that. Our lunches, our breakfast have meant a lot to me. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
And now finally on staff. So you're going to talk about kind of how you got here and what you're doing now?
And quick funny story behind that whole email. So it was when my oldest daughter had our first grandchild, and she said, you are coming. We were living out of state. She said, you're coming to live by us. You're going to come work at my church. She's kind of directive. She gets that from her mom. Mm-hmm. Just kidding. But and then you and I just hit it off right away. Felt like we were lifelong friends, and so was excited. And I know you and I had conversations for years about the possibility of day.
What if?
Yeah, that I could come and join you on this team here at Watermark. And so earlier in this year, I met with several of the leaders along with you, and we just shared past experiences, left that meeting, and probably within a few hours, got a text of, hey, would you be interested in this role, directing regeneration? I knew about regen from so many people that had benefited from it in other churches. Maybe what people don't realize is how much Watermark locally serves other local churches. And so regen is a way through recovery that we're able to serve a lot of churches. So immediately I was interested, had a conversation with a few key staff people. And the more conversations we had, the more Karen and I prayed, the more it became obvious the Lord had this for us. And man, John, it's only been a few months now, but I love it. I love having a front row seat. For those who don't know anything about regeneration, it's really a discipleship ministry with a recovery application.
Yep.
And so people come in off the streets of Dallas. People come from other churches. People come from within Watermark. They're with us for a year. It's a program where they're daily walking through very strategic devotionals and time with the Lord through the Word. They're meeting weekly with small groups. They're meeting a large group weekly for worship and testimonies. And the Lord just transforms lives through His Word. And so having a front row seat to that is amazing. Get to work with a great staff team, about 140 volunteers that are just some of the best people we meet anywhere. So it's I'm still in the honeymoon phase, but it's just been a dream come true.
Well, so those of you that don't know, Regen is one of the things that we kind of share from Watermark here. So watermarkresources.com, you can see that actually next week as we're recording this, there'll be 450 people from around the country that are here learning about Regen so they can take it back to their church. So if we can help you with that, always you can look at our website. But I felt like when we were looking for that role, it was kind of a unicorn that I wasn't sure we were going to find. And then when you came into the picture, we were looking for someone who could both lead and someone who could pastor and had lots of experience, but still had energy. And I was like, who is this person going to be? And here you are, brother. It's been fun to have you on our team, do ministry with you, and then watch the way the staff has responded to you. So, which actually brings us to this podcast here. So you shared in staff, and you were talking about, just some of your regrets and in ministry, where you said you just really kind of focused in on one. And so afterwards we talked, and I said, Dave, did you say you had a list of them? And you go, oh, I've got a list. And so I said, well, give me a few. And so we talked through those. And so I just took some notes on some of the things that you said. And so if it's okay, I'll just kind of tee up, what I heard you say, and then let you just comment on it. And so you've been a pastor for how long, Dave?
3 decades now. And that was really my point of reflection. Realized earlier this summer that, hey, this is 30 years now. This is going on 30 years. Most of that time, John, as a lead pastor in a local church.
Yeah.
So I had a good opportunity to pause. And it's funny sometimes when you think back, you have a lot of fond recollections, but sometimes you're hit with, here's some regrets that I'd like to share with others so that perhaps they could avoid the same pitfalls that I fell into.
Yeah, I think some of those learnings are a little bit more visceral, a little more vivid when we make the mistakes, and we really can't save others from them. Sometimes we don't know what we did well, in hindsight, but we generally know our
That's
mistakes.
funny. It's just easier to see those things for some reason.
Absolutely.
They stick longer with you.
Indeed. Okay, friend. Well, let me kind of tee some of these up. And again, we don't, I'd love just kind of free form responses. So, Dave, the prompt I asked you was, hey, what are some of your regrets? What are some of the things that were hard in this 30 years? And the very first one you said was lost friendships. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. When I think back and look over the course of 30 years, more than events come to mind, faces come to mind, and friendships that were strong at one point in time that just kind of fell off the table. And a few times those revolved around conflict, John. Conflict in ministry, people that were coming to the church disagreed with the direction of the church. Yeah. Maybe it was a doctrinal issue that caused some disruption. Maybe it was just people going to another church. And so there were a few instances in which it was conflict that really drove those relationships apart. And as much as I've reached out to folks to try to reconcile, and people have been incredibly gracious. I've made so many mistakes along the way as a pastor. A lot of it was, please forgive me for being less than a good pastor to you, and people have been really gracious. So I'm thankful for those. But even then, even in the midst of forgiveness, relationships don't always pick up where they left off. But I think the majority of them would just be examples of changes in ministry, changes in churches that people that once were very close to you just kind of drift away, and you drift away and you go on to it. I know if we even look at the scripture, there's times where as God leads, relationships are changed, right? We have places I've served before, we use the phrase gospel goodbyes. Sometimes the Lord sends you out to another place and there's just no way to keep the intensity and the closeness of the relationships you left behind. And so I'm not really thinking along those lines either. I'm thinking about those in the middle, between conflict and being sent out elsewhere, that just probably as a result of neglect and just not being faithful and loyal, of following up with people, just friendships kind of fell off the map. And people that used to be really close to me, I think, I wonder how they're doing. I wonder how they're doing with the Lord. I wonder what's going on in their life. I wonder what their kids are doing. These kids that I knew for years. And so along with every regret, you can always have a resolution. Like, I don't want that to continue to happen. Yeah. Ray Ortland, a guy we both know, has said, let's make it our goal not to lose any more friends in ministry. And I think that's important.
Well, so I'm not pushing back. I'm just a genuine question. Like, it seems that in some respects we're kind of like Lego pieces, and we only have so many little nodes that we can plug relationships into. Sure. So isn't there just a kind of a bit of a math problem that as if you're in ministry for 30 years, there's just going to be so many people that come up close to you, but you can't actually have them all connected to you in the way that once was. Isn't there some components to that?
Absolutely, that's right. Right, we have capacities. Right, we only have so much relational capacity in our life, and oftentimes in the context of ministry, especially if you see ministry, which I think is the biblical way to see it, it's really about relationships. There are people you need to prioritize. There are those that need to be developed and discipled. And so much of ministry is about relationship. We only have so many relationships we can invest in. So without question, as the Lord redirects us in ministry endeavors, the relationships change. What I'm thinking of more are the friendships that aren't always associated directly with those ministry relationships, that you just kind of lose track of one another over the years. Sometimes you pick up right where you left off, and those are such a gift from the Lord.
Aren't they?
But sometimes you don't, and you think, maybe I was negligent here. Yeah. Maybe I could have been more faithful. Maybe I could have been more. I regret that person that once was really close to me now seems distant, and then you look at it from the standpoint of, and I could have done a better job of just being a faithful friend.
That's good, Dave. Well, as you and I are both getting a little bit older, I don't find myself looking back, wishing I had spent a little bit more time polishing up a talk or, getting a ministry plan, in just the right font and things like that. I don't have a lot of like tactical regrets about things. There's some, of course, there has to be, but I do have regrets about just people that I wish I would have kept up with.
Absolutely.
And I could have, had that been the biggest priority. And so I think as Pam and I think about kind of this next season, relationships is a big part of that, and we want to steward all the relationships that we have well, and not have regrets in this next kind of 20-year period. And
I love that.
But that's what I think as we get older, that's what we're going to be focusing on. So it's really good.
And the thing I noticed when I was much younger, and I should have been more attentive to this, As a ministry leader, as a church leader, oftentimes you're with people in situations of death, right? You get to be around people as they die. And I can't recall a single time anybody ever thought in those moments, wow, I wish I would have made more money. I wish I would have been more successful. I wish I would have had more degrees. Everybody in those moments are always focused in on the people they love the most, and they want them around them, and they want to be right with Jesus because they're about to meet him, and they want to be connected to the people they love the most. And so even for the newest leader, reverse engineer your life, build your life around that day, because that day's coming for us all.
And is coming. It is the one certain thing we have going in our lives. We will die. We will be, in that hospital room with the people that we have invested in and loved, or that feel estranged from us, and those will be our last moments. And begin with the end in mind, plan accordingly. And those are really, really good words, Dave. Young leaders, don't just produce, don't just crank things out, crush it, take over, all the things. Make sure that you're investing in the relationships that are closest to you. It's what you're going to be glad you did. So Dave, the second thing I heard you say was missed opportunities. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's easy to look back in hindsight and have a clear sense of what could have been, right? We all face decisions along the way in leadership, and there's maybe people that we gave up on too early. Maybe there are opportunities that presented themselves at a time that seemed to be challenging and would have required a step of faith, but we passed on them, and then we later look back and think, man, that would have flourished. So, I particularly look back, and what I've seen happen on a couple of occasions in my ministry experience have been these amazing opportunities that were in front of us, and yet behind the scenes, leaders couldn't work through conflict and challenges in their relationship and how they work together. And so at times the brokenness or dysfunction of what was happening among the leadership team behind the scenes compromised what was going on in ministry. So when I think about missed opportunities, I think about that. It's an easy thing to do, but it's a wrong thing to do, John, to look at the fruit of the ministry, and if the fruit seems good, to automatically assume that the roots are good, right? And so I think that there have been too many times that either division over, hey, where should we go? What should we do? Or even a lack of faith or fear, or even brokenness in relationships can contribute to missing out on the opportunities that God has for us.
That's fascinating. So I think probably 3 minutes ago when you started that, I think what I heard you say was like there was sometimes opportunities, but there wasn't relational capacity to execute them because there was either conflict or lack of trust or those kinds of things. And so once the opportunity presented itself, you couldn't in some respects maximize it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or even sustain it, because obviously the Lord does all this. We know that the Lord is the one who produces the fruit, but I do think there's opportunities where God gives us these. God blesses a ministry. Things are potentially going well or are going well, and we just can't get it together as leaders. And specifically, we can't either get on the same page strategically or relationally or even functionally, and things just don't go as they could have gone because we couldn't get it together. And those are the missed opportunities that I really regret as I look back over the course of time. And I've contributed to a couple of those on a big level, and man, I think about them often.
That's interesting. That's a really, really good word. So I think a lot of times we are in these mundane seasons, just being faithful, and then some type of opportunity, presents itself, whatever that might be, to start something new, to maximize something, bring someone else on the team. And so in that mundane time, you can tend to kind of downshift and go, this isn't the funnest season. What I'm doing is not really of that much importance. But I think what you're saying is in those moments when, you don't have as much on your plate, invest relationally, make sure everybody's solid with each other, make sure everyone is encouraged. They feel connected to you, you're whole and right with them, and they are with the team, so that when you metaphorically have an opportunity to take the field, that the 11-man, side of the ball is ready to go. And they like each other. They get in the huddle and they go, well, we're not sure how this is going to go, but we're ready and we love each other. We've got each other's backs. So you are doing the work, even though in some respects it's below the waterline, and it doesn't seem like the work, but it sure is. And it will either give you opportunities or minimize them. That's really good.
Well, I think the unity has to be something that we continually pursue, strategically, relationally, across the board. And what happens is, success is dangerous. And I'm using success in air quotes. People can't see that, but ministry success is dangerous, that you can gloss over the under the line issues because you look out and you think, look what the Lord's doing. He's doing this, therefore, and this is the dangerous assumption, therefore everything must be all right. We can ignore these things, that you even have a sinking sensation. I should pay attention. It's like we should take a time out and work on these things. And so eventually those things catch up to you. And I think what you miss in God's economy there is you miss an opportunity to continue to join in what he's doing. And he is absolutely persistent to say, I'm going to put this on pause and I'm going to make you guys go back and fix the things that are broken, even if it means the fruitfulness goes elsewhere.
That's good. That's not what I thought was coming on this point, but I think that's fantastic.
Hope it was helpful.
Oh, it's absolutely what I'm thinking. I've got faces that listen to this podcast. They've got energy and dreams and vision for days, and a necessary first step is to have a team that loves each other, is whole, and is ready to go. And so that is part of the equation.
I think that's part of the profile of leaders who seemingly accomplish so much. They're just so forward-looking, and they're taking the next hill. And God bless those who have that gift and disposition from the Lord. I think that's a gift from the Lord. But you need to be attentive to those that have their pulse on the team more than you do, and you need to invite them in to say, "What am I not seeing here?" Because
so good.
You can't take the hill without your team, and you can't take opportunities without everybody being mobilized and being unified relationally and strategically. And it happens too often that leaders leave people behind. They run ahead, and then the whole thing comes undone.
That's good. I'm in the middle of kind of one of those right now. Eric, who's been on the podcast previously, who functions in business kind of language, almost like the COO of Watermark Resources, and he said, here's some issues going on. And I didn't get a chance to catch him yesterday, but I will today, and I'll tell him, hey, thank you. Thank you for bringing that. That's the way this should work. And I don't want to bark him down and say, no, I don't agree with your take, or so thank you. Let's address that. And so yes, you want don't run those people off. Keep them close. So really good. Okay, Dave, number 3, it was careless words.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Oh man. There's so many times over the course of ministry that I can look back at. I mean, specific instances come to mind where what I was saying was true. What I was saying was potentially even helpful, but the way in which I said it wasn't thoughtful and ended up being harmful to the people that heard what I said. And, by the grace of God, we can always say we're sorry. There's always opportunity for recovery of relationships and those things. But I think about that. And then, John, I'm even thinking of sermons that I preached and things that I said in the context, which then it's really hard to circle back to everybody who was there that day. And it's not possible, but just
mass email. Yeah.
Where you have this thought like, hey, I think this is the right thought, but words are so important. And I think if I have a regret in this area, it's that I didn't invest the time that I needed to think about, pray about, evaluate what I was going to say. Obviously, those times you say something that you thought, hey, this was really good, and whoops, that didn't come out the way I hoped. I'm not talking about those instances. Yeah. I'm talking about just not doing the work up front to think about and pray about what you say before you say it, and the end result ends up being harmful when you hoped it would be helpful.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought about being in Africa. I don't know what the math would be, maybe 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And we're there as guests of an organization, and it would take way too long to explain the situation. But there is, imagine a group of 8 people who are all kinds of spun up about a situation. And I watched this, and I know how I would have handled it. I would have just walked in there and pulled out a big stick with a couple of scriptures and just kind of, metaphorically whacked people and put them all in their place and said, You guys are all crazy. Well, the guy that we were with, he's probably 60, 65, wise, really, really wise. And he pretty much did the exact opposite of what I would have done to deal with that situation, to diffuse it, to be corrective, to be pastoral. And I remember even I imagine my gait would have been very fast toward those people. And he walked up really, really slow. Even kind of stood. Even just his approach. He stood from the outside and looked in, and he moved a little closer, and he asked a few questions, and then he kept his voice low, and the whole thing just turned out beautifully. And, and we saw the same thing.
Yeah.
We thought the end result probably needed to be the same thing. But his approach, he just put on a master class in front of me. And it was the wisdom, he'd probably would say the same thing. There's some times I didn't do that. But in that culture, he was the one probably had the most respect, and he could have used it in a lot of different ways. I just saw his slow approach, and I saw everybody respond so well to that. And I've got that just seared in my mind, but that's the way you do it, And I think another thing too I've learned, Dave, I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot of times if you kind of traffic in helping people's lives get better, probably there are 20 steps that they should take,
Sure.
Yeah. They can't handle 20.
Yeah.
And so there's a wisdom in saying, I think these are your 1 or 2 right next steps. Even though I think you kind of have about 20, I don't think you could handle that. I think you'd be overloaded and wouldn't do any of them. And that's one I've learned. It's like I'm not going to give you the full detailed, consultant report on. But I think if you're asking me, I think this is the 1 or 2 things that I would do. This is the 1 or 2 verses I would look at and anchor on. Or I think this is your next conversation. And I remember, as a young man, just press and play on everything I thought. And it wasn't helpful. Those were careless words. So any other thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah. The people that I get to serve with now are exceptional at working with folks that you're describing, just brokenness. And they are able to do 2 things simultaneously, which I think is beautiful. One is they're able to have a God-centered vision for their lives. Here's what God wants to do in you redemptively. And so they're painting a long-term picture for them that's incredibly inviting to those who hear. But they also understand that exactly what you're saying. But here's the next step. Like, we're going to get there together, and the Lord's going to get us there. But, hey, maybe tomorrow looks like this, rather than pressing them carelessly towards that ultimate goal in a way that feels that just it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I think there's times, John, when I look back and almost out of my own sense of insecurity, and I'm thinking now more of the public stage, the pulpit, of going off script, making a subtle joke, wanting to kind of feeling a little insecure in how I'm.
Yes.
I think of the specific time where I was about to be a part of a larger church that was taking on the church that I planted, and they had an amazing media team, and they'd taken photos of our staff. And we had previously a woman who took, just out of her own time, she's an amateur photographer, took our staff photos. And I just made a joke of, I was speaking with one of our staff members. I had the old photo, so mine was not as high a quality as his. And I just, look at the difference between these 2. And just didn't think about how that might absolutely hurt her feelings and crush her, which in fact it did. And so I remember circling back to her and saying how sorry I was. I said it publicly, but you can't bring back that hurt. And I'm like, why? Why did it? Well, because out of my own need for some sort of quick gratification or security, if I want to say something quippy or funny in this moment, man, I regretted it later. It just was not well thought out. So, let your words be few and let them be deliberate, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know anyone who didn't have stories like that, and so just make sure that you just don't repeat.
Yeah, that's right.
You just learn from them,
We're going to make it, right?
Right. And that is part of a leader's journey. So really good words. Don't say anything out of anger. You always don't send that email. Don't get up in front of a group mad and address that. You'll regret it. So really good words, Dave. Okay. Number 4 was things unsaid. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's kind of the flip side of the third point, right? Like there's things I've said I wish I hadn't. There's things I wish I would have said that I didn't.
Yeah.
And specifically, I think we refer to this occasionally, that spidey sense, that sense of discernment. Like, I'm looking at someone's life. I'm seeing a trajectory here that's not overtly out of control yet, but you're getting to see things in place that I'm concerned, and you postpone it. I don't know why I've done that. Maybe it was a sense of not wanting to overreact. Maybe it was a sense of self-protection. Maybe it was a sense of fear of man, if I don't want to lose this person. And then you wait too long until the situation becomes critical. And the moment you do speak up, it's almost too little too late.
Yeah.
So, specifically, I was working with a person years ago whose work ethic began to slip a little bit. And I began to notice, like, this person, and we had a clear understanding of this is what we're committing to collectively to our leaders. I was in charge of leading the staff, but we understood. And coming in a little bit later, leaving a little earlier, and that those gaps begin to even get broader, and I just let it go. I let it go to the point where now it was a do or die conversation. Now it was like, hey, things have got to radically change or else. And I thought to myself, this was this person's blind spot. I don't know that it was the deliberate, I want to take advantage of the situation. I think this person was drifting into a blind spot, and I could have easily have said something. And there's countless examples. I bet everybody listening has a few of those. I wish I would have. Yeah. I wish I would have pointed out what I thought was a problem in marriage. I wish I would have said something before I did. I wish I would have spoke up in an elder meeting and said, hey, guys, I think we might be not considering something strategically. I didn't say it. For whatever the motive was, I didn't say it, and I wish I would have. So, yeah, I can think of a lot of examples like that, John.
That's good. Well, and again, all I know to do is just learn from them. Yeah. You know, when you wonder if someone's driving over a cliff, and in fact they do, you know, with their lives metaphorically, let that sear into your soul. And go, I'm just not going to let that happen again. Or, you know, some type of tactical decision or strategic decision you're making when you should have said something and you didn't, just learn from it, you know, and get really, really good at getting in front of that. There will always be things that are unsaid. Just make sure you learn from them. And I think every leader would kind of, in some ways, they've got their own stories, Dave, but they would all resonate with that. So the last one you said, and I'd love your thoughts because I think I share this one, is impatience. Yeah. One of your regrets was impatience. Yeah. So tell me what I probably already know, but I'm just not understanding.
You know, a lot of my experiences being able to work within the context of church plants or being associated with church planters, and oftentimes the greatest mistake that ministry leaders make is they give up too soon. Yeah. The results aren't what we would like them to be. Perhaps we get a little bit flustered by that, and we want to change things. We want to give up on them and redirect things. And you know, someone has said, I don't know who it is, whoever to attribute this to. It wasn't me, but you know, God's change happens at the pace of relationship, and relationship takes time. So there have just been too many people I've given up on prematurely, and too many ministry programs that I pulled the plug on that I just needed to be patient. I needed to be deliberate. I needed to be prayerful. And again, that goes a lot of times with the leader profile. You know, if you're a change agent leader, that's be who God has designed you to be, but do it in the context of community. Have people around you who are a little bit more deliberate, a little more cautious. Over the years, the most valuable person to me on a staff team or an elder team is probably the most opposite person of me. Yeah. The person is, hey, let's be careful here, let's stay together. That's not how I'm wired. Man, John, I need that person because I have countless examples of being impatient in ministry. And I think what could have been. Yeah. If I just would have listened to others, I would have been patient.
Yes, I know. And I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Generally, it's too early to tell. It's just I just find myself saying that it's just too early to tell. And so what's helpful is for me to read any of the Old Testament narratives and see, you know, any of those figures or New Testament figures, but in the middle of their journey and how they must have thought, I am doing the wrong thing. God is not in charge. This is unmitigated disaster. I'm going exactly the wrong direction until they kind of persevere, stay faithful, and realize, oh no, I was on the right path the entire time. Just not how I would have scripted it. God was at work. I can trust Him, and it was just too early to tell. Had I pulled the plug in the middle of that, you know, in the middle of the desert or from prison, it would have been the wrong time to do so. Yeah. And it was just, you know, and so that's the dreams that God's put in our hearts. That's walking with people. You know, sanctification is a process. It's not a one power encounter where you give someone 3 verses they should memorize, and now you know they're ready to be an elder. It's a process, and so it's a really, really good word, Dave. Really, really good word. And it's interesting to me. In the studio, we've kind of got you're playing this like wise pastor, sage person, but you're like a really big thinker, and you think at scale, and you think about speed, but when you think about your regrets, if I could pick a category, most of them are relational. When you think about
right,
and that is just such a great lesson for young leaders, and so really, really good. Well, Dave, thanks so much, brother. It has been a joy to be with you. Some really good things. Friends, I hope you, again, we like to talk about strategy and tactics sometimes because leaders need to be thinking about that. But it is interesting. It is interesting to begin with the end in mind and think about what is it that you're going to value? What is it that you're going to regret as you get older? And most of these, Dave, are relational. And it's a big part of a leader's journey, a big part of a leader's effectiveness. It's just not dreaming up crazy ideas to go execute that would be fun. It's it's people. It's people.
Absolutely.
And you will have regrets. You will have regrets. I think the goal is just to minimize them and also learn from them. So brother, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
We'll get you back in here again soon. So friends, thanks so much for listening today. Hope there's one or two good takeaways for you. If we can help you, serve you, if you have any questions or comments, you can always reach us at clp@watermark.org. That's clp@watermark.org. We'll talk to you again next time.